I stood there, frozen in the doorway of what used to be my home, staring at the empty rooms where my life had unfolded for decades. The walls echoed with silence, stripped bare of the pictures and memories that had filled them. My heart pounded as I clutched the key that no longer fit the lock. Someone had changed it. How could this happen? My own children, the ones I raised with every ounce of love I had sold the house right out from under me. They thought I was too old, too frail to notice, but they had no idea what secrets were buried within these walls, secrets that would turn their world upside down. Let me back up just a bit. My name's Margaret, and I'm a widow in my late 70s, but don't let the years fool you. I've got a fire in me that time hasn't dimmed. I've spent my life building a family, sacrificing everything for my two children, Sarah and Michael. They were my world after my husband, Robert, passed away 15 years ago. He left me this house, our sanctuary, filled with the echoes of our laughter and tears. But lately, things had shifted. Sarah and Michael started visiting less. Their calls grew shorter, and I could sense the greed creeping in, especially after they learned about Robert's old investments. They assumed the house was just bricks and mortar, worth a quick sale to fund their lavish lives. Oh, how wrong they were. It all came crashing down that rainy afternoon. I had been away for a week, staying with an old friend in the next town to clear my head. The doctor said I needed rest after a minor fall, but I knew it was more than that. Loneliness had been eating at me. As I pulled up in the driveway, something felt off. The curtains were gone, the garden unkempt, and a "sold" sign stabbed into the front lawn like a betrayal. My hands trembled as I approached the door, fumbling with my keys. The lock turned, but the door wouldn't budge. A chain on the inside? No, wait, the key didn't even fit anymore. Panic rose in my throat. I banged on the door, calling out, but only silence answered. I stepped back, rain soaking through my coat, and that's when I saw it. A moving truck pulling away down the street, loaded with furniture that looked suspiciously like mine. My furniture, my life. I pulled out my phone with shaking fingers and dialed Sarah first. "Mom? What's wrong?" she answered, her voice too casual, too rehearsed. "What's wrong? The house is sold. There's a sign out front and my key doesn't work," I shouted, my voice breaking. There was a pause, a heavy one that spoke volumes. "Oh, Mom, we thought it was for the best. You're getting older and that big house is too much for you. We found a nice assisted living place. The money from the sale will cover it all." "You did what?" I whispered, the words barely escaping me. Betrayal hit me like a wave, knocking the breath out of me. They hadn't even told me. No discussion, no warning, just took it upon themselves to uproot my life, pocket the proceeds, and shuffle me off like an old piece of furniture. Michael jumped on the call next, his tone defensive. "Mom, listen, the market's hot right now. We got a great price. You'll thank us later." Thank them for stealing my home? I hung up, tears mixing with the rain on my face. But as I stood there, something stirred inside me. A memory, a secret Robert and I had kept for years. Hidden deep within that house was something they never knew about, something that could change everything. If they thought this was the end, they were sorely mistaken. This was just the beginning of their reckoning. I wandered to the side of the house, peering through a window into the empty living room. The new owners hadn't moved in yet. The place was a shell. My mind raced back to the day Robert showed me the hidden compartment in the basement. "Maggie," he had said, his eyes twinkling with mischief, "this is our little insurance policy for when times get tough." We had laughed about it then, but now it felt like fate. What was inside wasn't just valuables. It was power. Power to expose, to reclaim, to make them pay for their greed. But how could I get inside now? The house was no longer mine, legally at least. I needed a plan, something clever to retrieve what was hidden without alerting anyone. As I sat on the wet curb, wiping my eyes, a neighbor approached, umbrella in hand. "Margaret, is everything okay? I saw the sign go up a few days ago. Your kids said you approved it. Approved it? The lie stung even more. No, Helen, I didn't. They did this behind my back. Her face softened with sympathy, and she invited me in for tea. As we talked, pieces started falling into place. Helen mentioned seeing Sarah and Michael arguing with the real estate agent about rushing the closing. They seemed in a hurry, she said, like they couldn't wait to get the cash. That hurry would be their downfall. I knew the hidden spot was secure, undetectable unless you knew where to look. But time was ticking. The new owners could discover it any day. I had to act fast. That night, in Helen's guest room, I lay awake, plotting. First, I'd confront them properly, make them think I was broken, defeated. Then, when they least expected it, I'd strike back. The next morning, I called a lawyer friend from church, someone Robert had trusted. Margaret, this sounds like elder abuse, she said firmly. We can fight this. Fight? Oh yes, but not just in court. This was personal. As I hung up, a small smile crept onto my face for the first time since the discovery. They had no idea what was coming. The house held more than memories. It held their undoing. Days blurred into a whirlwind of emotions. Anger fueled me during the day, sadness crept in at night. I missed my bed, my kitchen, the little things that made it home. But each memory hardened my resolve. Sarah and Michael thought they could discard me like yesterday's news, but I was about to show them the strength of a mother's love turned to justice. I met them at a coffee shop, neutral ground. Sarah looked guilty, fidgeting with her napkin, while Michael avoided my eyes. Mom, we're sorry we didn't tell you sooner, Sarah started, but you need help. The house was falling apart. Falling apart, or was it your patience? I shot back, my voice steady despite the storm inside. They exchanged glances, and that's when I saw it, the entitlement, the lack of remorse. They truly believed they were right. As we talked, I probed gently. What about the contents? Did you clear everything out? Michael nodded. Yeah, we hired movers, kept some family stuff for you, sold the rest. Sold the rest. My blood boiled, but I kept calm. They hadn't found it yet. Good. The hidden compartment was in the basement wall, behind a false panel Robert had built himself. Inside? Not just cash or jewels, though there were those too. No, the real treasure was documents, proof of investments Robert had made in secret, stocks and bonds worth a fortune, all in my name. And more importantly, evidence of Sarah and Michael's early schemes, like the time they borrowed money from us under false pretenses and never paid it back. Robert had kept records, just in case. They didn't know. How could they? We never told them. But now, with the house sold, retrieving it meant breaking in or convincing the new owners. Risky, but necessary. Leaving the coffee shop, I felt a spark of hope amid the hurt. This betrayal had awakened something in me. A fighter. I wasn't going down without reclaiming what was mine. And when I did, they'd learn the hard way that family isn't about blood. It's about loyalty. But first, I needed allies. Helen was one, the lawyer another, maybe even an old friend of Robert's who knew about the compartment. As I walked back to Helen's, the rain had stopped and a faint rainbow arched across the sky. A sign? Perhaps. The storm wasn't over, but I was ready to face it head on. Little did I know, the new owners had already started renovations. Time was running out faster than I thought. Would I make it in time, or would the secret be lost forever, along with my chance for payback? The coffee shop meeting left a bitter taste that no amount of tea could wash away. I walked away from Sarah and Michael with my head high, but inside I was crumbling. Their words echoed in my mind. You'll thank us later. Thank them for tearing my world apart, for deciding my life without a single conversation? No, gratitude wasn't what they were going to get. That evening, back at Helen's cozy kitchen table, I finally let the tears fall freely. Helen sat across from me, holding my hand like a lifeline. They're your babies, Margaret. How could they do this? Because money changes people, and they've changed. Helen nodded slowly. What are you going to do now? I'm going to take back what's mine. Not just the house, everything they tried to steal from me. She raised an eyebrow. "The house is sold, dear. Legally." "Not everything is on paper," I interrupted gently. "Robert always said our real wealth wasn't in the bank statements they could see. It was hidden where no one would look." Helen's eyes widened. "You mean the thing in the basement?" I nodded. Years ago, Robert had turned part of the old coal chute into a secret safe room. Not some dramatic vault with lasers and codes, just clever carpentry. A false brick wall behind the furnace, a pull-out panel only he and I knew how to open. Inside were 2 fireproof boxes. One held cash, emergency money we never touched. The other held the real power, investment certificates from the 1980s and 1990s, blue-chip stocks Robert had quietly bought and forgotten about. He called them the quiet fortune. Over the decades, with splits and dividends reinvested, they'd grown into something enormous. My lawyer friend estimated, after a quick call the next morning, that if the documents were still intact, we're talking close to 8 figures. 8 figures. But that wasn't even the part that burned hottest. Tucked beside the certificates were letters, Robert's letters. Not love notes to me, records. Detailed records of every time Sarah or Michael had asked for help that turned into handouts they never repaid. The time Michael needed money for a business opportunity that vanished. The time Sarah borrowed for a down payment on a condo she later sold for profit without ever mentioning us. Robert had documented it all, not out of distrust, but out of love. One day they might need to remember where kindness came from, he used to say. Now those papers were evidence of patterns, evidence that could make any judge look twice at this sudden house sale. But first, I had to get inside. Helen leaned forward. "The new owners moved in yesterday. Young couple. Nice, from what the neighbors say, but they're already tearing up the kitchen." My stomach dropped. Tearing up the kitchen? New cabinets, new flooring. They started downstairs too, said the basement smelled musty. Musty. The furnace. The false wall? If they ripped out the wrong panel? I stood up so fast the chair scraped the floor. "I have to go tonight." Helen grabbed my arm. "Margaret, you can't just break in. I'm not breaking in," I said, though my voice shook. "I'm visiting what's still mine in spirit." She stared at me for a long moment, then sighed. "At least let me help. My nephew works security. He can look the other way for 20 minutes if I ask nicely." 20 minutes. It would have to be enough. That night, under a moonless sky, Helen drove me 2 streets over and parked. I wore dark clothes, gloves, and carried a small flashlight and the old key ring Robert had made, duplicate keys to everything, including the side basement door he installed for emergencies. We waited until the new owner's lights went out around 11. Helen whispered, "Be quick and be careful." I slipped through the backyard like a shadow, heart hammering so loud I was sure the whole neighborhood could hear it. The side door was still there, unchanged. My key slid in. Click. The door opened silently. Inside, the basement smelled of fresh paint and sawdust. Tools lay scattered near the stairs. They really were renovating. I moved past the new water heater, past stacks of drywall, straight to the old furnace corner. The false panel looked untouched, dusty, unremarkable. I knelt, fingers finding the hidden latch Robert had carved so perfectly. One twist, one pull, and the panel slid aside. There they were, 2 metal boxes exactly where we'd left them 30 years earlier. I opened the first. Cash, still crisp, still banded. The second, folders, yellowed but intact. Certificates, letters, a small notebook with Robert's neat handwriting listing every transaction, every date, every zero added over time. Tears blurred my vision as I touched his words. For Maggie, always. I slipped everything into the canvas bag I'd brought, closed the panel, and backed out the way I came. The door shut behind me with the softest click. I made it back to Helen's car without being seen. She didn't speak until we were 3 blocks away. "Did you get it?" I nodded, clutching the bag to my chest like a newborn. "Everything." She let out a shaky laugh. "You did it. You actually did it." But the victory felt hollow. Getting the documents was step one. Now came the hard part, using them. The next morning, I sat with my lawyer, Mrs. Patel, spreading the papers across her desk like battle plans. She scanned them, eyes growing wider with each page. Margaret, this isn't just money. This is leverage. Enormous leverage. How enormous? I asked quietly. Conservatively, between 12 and 15 million, depending on current valuations. And these letters, she tapped the folder, if we present this in court, it paints a very different picture of your children's concern for your well-being. I swallowed hard. I don't want to destroy them. I just want them to understand what they've done. Mrs. Patel looked at me over her glasses. Sometimes understanding only comes after consequences. She was right. We filed an emergency injunction to halt any distribution of the sale proceeds. We also filed a civil suit for undue influence, breach of fiduciary duty, and fraud in the inducement of the sale. Harsh words, but accurate ones. Sarah and Michael were served papers within 48 hours. The phone calls started immediately. Sarah first, voice trembling. "Mom, what is this? A lawsuit? You're suing us? You sold my home without permission. You changed the locks. You lied. What did you expect?" Michael came on next, angrier. "This is ridiculous. We were trying to help you." "Help," I repeated softly, "by taking everything I had left?" Silence stretched across the line. Then Sarah, quieter now. "We didn't know about the money. We thought the house was all there was. You didn't ask, you assumed, and assumptions have consequences." I hung up before they could argue further. That night, I sat alone in Helen's spare room, staring at the ceiling. Part of me wanted to forgive them, to pretend none of this happened. But another part, the part Robert had always nurtured, knew forgiveness without accountability was just another way of being erased. The court date was set for 3 weeks later. In those weeks, I learned things I never wanted to know. Through discovery, we uncovered bank statements showing Sarah and Michael had already spent chunks of the down payment, new cars, vacations, paying off credit cards. They hadn't even waited for the full closing funds. Mrs. Patel shook her head. Greed makes people sloppy. Sloppy enough to leave a trail a mile wide. As the hearing approached, I received a handwritten letter from Sarah. "Mom, I don't know how to say this without sounding pathetic, but I'm sorry, truly sorry. Michael and we got scared. Scared of the future, scared of money running out. We convinced ourselves you wouldn't notice, that you'd be happier somewhere smaller. We were wrong, so wrong. Please don't hate us forever. Sarah." I read it 3 times. The tears came again, not from pain this time, but from exhaustion. I wanted to believe her, but words are cheap when actions scream louder. I wrote back 1 line. "Words aren't enough anymore. See you in court." The days leading up to the court hearing felt like walking through quicksand. Every step forward pulled me deeper into memories I didn't want to face. I spent hours poring over those old documents with Mrs. Patel, each page a reminder of Robert's quiet wisdom. He'd seen this coming in a way, not the betrayal exactly, but the way life could twist people you loved into strangers. "People change, Maggie," he'd say over coffee in our kitchen, "but truth doesn't." Now that truth was my weapon, sharp and ready. Helen became my rock during those weeks. We'd sit on her porch swing, watching the neighborhood come alive each morning, and she'd listen as I vented. "They called again last night," I'd say, voice tight, begging me to drop the suit, said it would tear the family apart. "And what did you tell them?" Helen would ask, her eyes steady. "That they already did." It wasn't just anger driving me anymore. It was a deep, aching sadness for what we'd lost. Sarah and Michael weren't monsters. They were my children, flawed and human, but their choices had crossed a line, and ignoring that would mean losing myself too. Mrs. Patel worked tirelessly, gathering more evidence. We subpoenaed their financial records, and what came back shocked even her. Not only had they spent the down payment, but they'd forged my signature on power of attorney documents to speed up the sale. Forged! My own handwriting, mimicked poorly but enough to fool a hurried notary. When I saw the scans, my hands shook so badly I had to set them down. "How could they?" I whispered to Mrs. Patel. She placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Fear and desperation make fools of us all, but this strengthens our case tenfold." We also tracked down the real estate agent they'd used, a slick young man named Derek, who specialized in quick flips. Turns out, Sarah had dated his brother in college. It was all too cozy. Mrs. Patel deposed him, and under oath, he admitted rushing the paperwork because Michael promised a bonus if it closed fast. Bonus from my money. Each revelation built my resolve like bricks in a wall. I wasn't just fighting for the house proceeds, I was fighting for dignity, for the years I'd poured into raising them. Sarah's first steps in that living room, Michael's scraped knees from biking in the driveway, all those moments erased for cash. But amid the storm, small lights flickered. Old friends rallied around me. Robert's best friend, Tom, came by with stories that made me laugh through tears. "Rob always said you were the tough one," he'd chuckle. "Looks like he was right." Tom even helped value the investments. We took the certificates to a financial advisor, discreetly, of course. The numbers made my head spin. $14.2 million, give or take market fluctuations. Robert's quiet fortune had grown louder than any of us imagined. Dividends alone could have kept me comfortable for life without selling a thing. Why didn't we tell them? I wondered aloud one evening. Helen sipped her tea. Because Robert knew. He saw the signs early, the way they always wanted more. She was right. Flashbacks hit me hard. Sarah's wedding, where she insisted on a venue we couldn't afford, guilting us into dipping into savings. Michael's loans that turned into gifts. Robert had started hiding the assets after that, not out of meanness, but protection. Now, protection turned to payback. As the court date neared, Sarah and Michael switched tactics. No more anger, just pleas. Michael showed up at Helen's door one afternoon, hat in hand, looking like the boy I remembered. "Mom," he said, voice cracking, "can we talk? Alone." Helen excused herself, but I knew she was listening from the kitchen. He sat across from me, eyes red-rimmed. "We messed up. Big time. Sarah's a wreck. She can't sleep. We never meant to hurt you like this." "Never meant to?" I echoed softly. "You changed the locks, sold my home, spent the money before it was even yours." He hung his head. We thought you'd understand eventually. The assisted living place is nice, Mom. Ocean view rooms." "Ocean view?" I laughed bitterly. "I don't want an ocean view. I want my home, my memories." He reached for my hand, but I pulled back. "Please drop the suit. We'll give you half the proceeds, more even. Just don't drag this out." Half, as if it were theirs to give. I looked him in the eyes, the same blue as Robert's. "It's too late for deals, Michael. You made your choice. Now face it." He left defeated, shoulders slumped. Part of me wanted to call him back, to hug him and say it was all a bad dream, but the stronger part held firm. That night I dreamed of Robert. He was in the basement, showing me the panel again. "For when you need it most," he said, smiling. I woke with fresh determination. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully, a simple navy suit Robert always liked. Helen drove me to the courthouse, squeezing my hand at every red light. "You've got this." The courtroom was smaller than I expected, wood-paneled and echoing. Sarah and Michael sat on the other side with their lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in heels that clicked like judgments. They avoided my gaze until the judge uttered. "All rise," the bailiff called. As proceedings began, Mrs. Patel laid out our case methodically, the forged documents, the rushed sale, the spent funds. Then came the hidden assets, proof that the house wasn't my only resource, that their help was unnecessary and self-serving. Their lawyer countered, painting me as confused, forgetful. Mrs. Thompson is elderly, she said smoothly. Her children acted in her best interest. Elderly. The word stung, but I sat straight, unflinching. Then Mrs. Patel called me to the stand. I walked up slowly, swore the oath, and faced the room. Sarah's eyes met mine, pleading, tearful. Michael looked away. "Mrs. Thompson," Mrs. Patel began, "can you tell the court about the hidden compartment?" I nodded, voice steady. "My husband built it years ago, for safekeeping. Inside were investments worth millions, and records of loans to my children that were never repaid." Gasps rippled through the room. Their lawyer objected, but the judge overruled. I continued, detailing the betrayal, the shock of the sold sign, the empty rooms. My voice broke once, describing Robert's notebook. He wrote it all down, for protection. He knew love sometimes needs boundaries. When I finished, the courtroom fell silent. The judge adjourned for recess, but I could see it in his eyes. We had them. Outside, Sarah approached, whispering, "Mom, please, we can fix this." But as I looked at her, I saw not just my daughter, but the woman who'd chosen greed over family. "Fixing starts with truth," I said, "and we're not done yet." Back in session, more witnesses. The real estate agent, squirming under questions, Tom vouching for Robert's intentions, even Helen describing my devastation that rainy day. Their side crumbled. Michael's testimony was halting, admissions slipping out. We panicked. Debts were piling up. Debts from lifestyles they couldn't sustain. By day's end, the judge ruled in my favor. The sale was voided. Title reverted to me, proceeds frozen, to be redistributed after audits. And penalties, they had to repay what they'd spent, plus interest. But the real blow? Court-ordered counseling for family reconciliation. And me, custody of the assets, full control. As we left, Sarah hugged me fiercely. "I'm so sorry, Mom." Michael nodded, tears streaming. "We get it now." Do they? Time would tell. That night, back in my house, yes, mine again, after the new owners were compensated, I sat in Robert's old chair, the documents safe beside me. The storm had passed, but scars remained. Yet in the quiet, I felt peace. Justice wasn't just winning, it was reclaiming my voice. But wait, there was one more twist. As I sorted the papers, a small envelope fell out. Robert's final letter, unsealed until now. "Dearest Maggie, if you're reading this, things got tough. Remember, forgiveness is strength, not weakness, but never forget your worth. Love always, Rob." Tears fell anew. Maybe, just maybe, reconciliation was possible. Winning in court should have felt like a triumph, like the sun breaking through after a long, dark winter. But as I stood outside the courthouse, the weight of it all pressed down on me heavier than before. The judge's gavel had fallen, declaring the house mine again, the funds frozen, and my children accountable. Yet victory tasted bittersweet, laced with the sorrow of a family fractured. Sarah and Michael lingered on the steps, their faces pale masks of regret. Sarah reached out, her hand trembling. "Mom, can we talk? Really talk?" I nodded, but not there, not with prying eyes and echoing halls. "Come to the house tomorrow, our house." They agreed, voices small. As Helen drove me home, she glanced over. "You okay?" "I think so," I murmured. "But this isn't over. Winning papers doesn't mend hearts." That night, alone in my reclaimed living room, I wandered the empty spaces. The new owners had taken most of their changes with them. New paint peeled back, floors half done. It felt like a ghost of itself. I sat on the worn couch we'd salvaged from storage, Robert's letter in my lap. His words echoed. "Forgiveness is strength." But how do you forgive when the wound is still fresh? Memories flooded me unbidden. Sarah as a little girl, curls bouncing as she ran through these halls, giggling about hide and seek. Michael building forts from blankets and chairs, declaring himself king. Robert and I watching, hearts full. Where had that gone? When did love turn to transactions? I traced the investment's history in my mind. Robert started small, a tip from a colleague about tech stocks in the 80s. Apple, Microsoft, names that meant little then but exploded later. He funneled bonuses there, never boasting, always saying, for the family. But as the kids grew, their wants grew too. College funds drained by emergencies, weddings that ballooned. We gave freely, but Robert drew a line with the hidden stash. This is for us, Maggie, for when we're old and gray. Old and gray. Here I was, graying alone, fighting my own blood. Sleep came fitfully, dreams of Robert whispering warnings. Morning brought a knock. Sarah and Michael, earlier than expected, carrying coffee and a box of my favorite pastries from the old bakery downtown. A peace offering? We sat at the kitchen table, the same one we'd shared countless meals. Silence hung heavy until Sarah broke it. Mom, we don't know where to start. Start with why, I said softly. Why sell without asking? Why forge my name? Michael rubbed his temples. It started small. Debts, credit cards, car loans. Sarah's business tanked last year. Mine too. We saw the house as an asset, not your home. An asset, I repeated, the word cold on my tongue. Sarah's eyes filled. We convinced ourselves you'd be better off, safer, but really we were scared. Scared of failing, of asking for help again. Again. The word hung there, linking back to Robert's records. I pulled out the folder, the one with the letters, laid it open. Your father kept track, every time we helped, not to judge, but to remember. They scanned the pages, faces draining of color. Michael whispered, We forgot half of this. Forgot? I asked gently, or chose not to remember. Tears spilled from Sarah. We took it for granted. You and Dad always there, always giving. We stopped seeing the cost. The conversation stretched hours. Admissions poured out. Hidden addictions to spending, pressures from spouses, envy of friends' lives. Michael confessed pocketing loans for gambling apps. Sarah admitted using house equity lines we'd co-signed without telling us the full story. Each revelation hurt, but healed too, like lancing a wound. I shared my side, the loneliness after Robert, the fear of being burdensome. I wasn't frail, I was grieving, and you assumed. By afternoon, exhaustion set in, but something shifted. Hugs replaced distance, promises made, therapy, repayment plans, no more secrets. But as they left, doubt crept in. Words were easy. Actions? We'd see. The next weeks blurred into restoration. I hired contractors to fix the renovations, my way, with the investment dividends funding it. Helen helped pick colors, turning it into girl time. This place needs life again, she'd say. Sarah started visiting daily, helping unpack boxes we'd stored. Michael fixed the leaky roof, sweats mixing with apologies. Small steps, but meaningful. One evening, as we sorted old photos, Sarah found a faded album. Look, us as kids. We laughed over bowl haircuts and awkward phases. Then a serious moment. Mom, about the money, the investments. We don't deserve any. I shook my head. It's not about deserving. It's about learning. Robert wanted it for family, real family, not takers. We talked estate planning then. I'd update my will, include them fairly, but with trusts to protect. No more free rides. But life throws curves. A month post-court, Mrs. Patel called. Margaret, we found discrepancies in the sale docs. The agent, Derek, he skimmed fees illegally. Your kids might not have known. Might not, but investigation revealed texts, Michael pushing for speed, offering tips. Not innocent. I confronted them over dinner. You knew about the shortcuts? Sarah paled. Michael sighed. Not all, but yeah, we pushed. Anger flared anew. Why admit now? Because we're trying, Sarah pleaded. No more lies. I believed them, barely. We agreed they'd testify against Derek if needed. Clean slate. As months passed, bonds mended slowly. Family dinners returned. Laughter genuine. Michael got a steady job. Sarah restarted her business honestly. They repaid chunks monthly, pride in their eyes. One day, clearing the basement fully, we found another box. Robert's old journals. Entries about us all. Love shining through worries. Proud of my kids, he wrote. They'll find their way. Reading together, tears flowed. He believed in us, Michael said. And I do too, I replied. The climax wasn't court. It was this, choosing forgiveness amid truth. But hidden deeper, growth. They volunteered at senior centers, seeing isolation's toll. I joined too, finding purpose. Life settled. The house bloomed anew. Gardens replanted, walls warm with photos. Yet echoes lingered. Betrayal's scar reminded, trust but verify. In quiet moments, I'd whisper to Robert's photo, we made it through. And somehow I knew he smiled. The house felt different now, not just because the walls were freshly painted or the garden bloomed again with roses Robert had planted decades ago. It felt different because I was different. The woman who once answered every call from her children with open arms had learned to set boundaries. The mother who gave without question had discovered the power of saying no. And strangely, that made the love feel deeper, truer. Sarah moved back into town 6 months after the court case. Not into the house, no, that chapter was closed, but into a modest apartment 10 minutes away. She sold her flashy SUV, traded it for something practical, and started working at a local nonprofit that helped seniors avoid financial exploitation. Irony? Perhaps. But I saw the sincerity in her eyes when she told me about her first client, an elderly man whose nephew tried to pressure him into signing over his home. I told him, she said one Sunday afternoon over tea on the porch, that family doesn't mean ownership, it means respect. I reached across the small table and squeezed her hand. For the first time in a long while, the touch didn't feel forced. Michael took longer. Pride kept him distant at first. He moved to a smaller city an hour away, found steady work in construction management, something honest, physical, far removed from the quick money schemes he'd chased before. He called once a week, never asking for anything, just checking in. "How's the garden, Mom?" he'd ask. "Did the roses revive the frost?" "They did," I'd reply. "They're stubborn, like someone else I know." One weekend, he showed up unannounced with a toolbox and a sheepish grin. Heard the back deck was creaking, thought I'd fix it before it collapses. I watched from the kitchen window as he worked, short sleeves rolled up, sweat on his brow, humming an old tune Robert used to sing while fixing things around the house. When he finished, the deck was solid again. He wiped his hands on a rag and looked up at me. "I can't undo what I did," he said quietly, "but I can make sure I never do it again." I nodded. "That's enough for now." We didn't hug that day. Some wounds need time before touch feels safe again. But we sat together on the repaired deck until sunset, talking about nothing important and everything that mattered. Therapy became part of our new rhythm. Individual sessions for each of us, then family sessions once a month. The counselor, a calm woman named Dr. Ellis, never sugarcoated things. Betrayal leaves scar tissue, she told us in our first joint meeting. It doesn't disappear, but scar tissue can be strong. It can protect what's underneath. She was right. We learned to name the hurt without weaponizing it. Sarah admitted the shame she carried for years, feeling like the responsible one while secretly resenting how much she relied on us. Michael confessed the fear that drove him, fear of never measuring up to Robert, fear of failing his own family. I shared my own guilt. Had I given too much? Had I taught them that love was measured in dollars and deeds? Dr. Ellis listened, then asked the question that changed everything. What does family look like moving forward if trust has been broken? We sat in silence a long time before I answered. It looks like honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. It looks like showing up, not just when it's convenient. And it looks like forgiveness, not the kind that forgets, but the kind that chooses to remember the good while protecting against the bad. Sarah wiped her eyes. I want that, more than anything. Michael nodded. Me too. Progress wasn't linear. There were setbacks. A holiday where old tensions flared over who should host dinner. A phone call where Michael slipped and asked about the investments, then immediately apologized when he realized how it sounded. A night Sarah cried on my couch because a coworker called her the girl who almost lost her mom her house. Pain resurfaced, but we faced it together instead of running. The money itself became less important over time. I kept most of the investments intact, living off modest dividends. The rest went into a family trust, not for handouts, but for education, emergencies, and legacy. Grandchildren, when they came, would have college funds. Sarah and Michael would have access only with mutual agreement. No more secrets, no more assumptions. One crisp autumn day, almost 2 years after the sold sign first appeared, we gathered in the backyard for a small ceremony. Not a celebration of winning, but of surviving. I'd planted a new oak tree, strong roots, slow growth, long life. We each placed a handful of soil around its base. This tree, I said, is for Robert and for us, for what was broken and what can still grow. Sarah knelt beside me, pressing dirt into the earth. I'm sorry, Mom. Every day I'm sorry. I know, and I forgive you. Not because it erases the past, but because I choose not to let the past erase our future. Michael added his soil last. I promise to be better. Not perfect, just better. The tree stood small against the sky, but its roots were already reaching, like us. Years later, 5 to be exact, I sat on that same porch swing, now with 2 little granddaughters playing in the grass. Sarah's girls. Michael and his wife were due any minute with their newborn son. The house rang with life again. Laughter, footsteps, the clatter of dishes being set for Sunday dinner. I looked at the oak, taller now, branches spreading wide, and felt Robert's presence stronger than ever, not in ghosts or whispers, but in the way love, when tended carefully, outlasts even the deepest betrayals. Sarah came out carrying lemonade. You okay, Mom? I smiled, real and unforced. Better than okay. She sat beside me. We almost lost this. We did lose it, I corrected gently. For a while, but we fought to get it back. All of us. Michael arrived then, baby in arms, wife smiling beside him. The grandchildren ran to greet their cousin. Chaos and joy filled the yard. As the sun dipped low, painting everything gold, I thought about that rainy afternoon when I first saw the sold sign. The shock, the rage, the loneliness. And I thought about the woman I became because of it. Stronger, wiser, more fiercely protective of what truly mattered. Betrayal had nearly destroyed us, but in the end, it forced us to rebuild something better, something honest, something unbreakable. And that, I believe, is the truest form of justice. Even after the oak tree took root and the grandchildren's laughter filled the yard, shadows lingered in quiet corners of my mind. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing not to let the memory control you. But some nights, when the house settled into silence, old questions crept back in. Had I been too harsh? Had I punished them more than necessary? Or had I finally learned the hardest lesson of all, that love without boundaries invites destruction? Sarah noticed first. She had always been the more perceptive one, the daughter who could read my moods before I spoke them. One crisp November evening, as we raked leaves together under the spreading branches of the oak, she paused, leaning on her rake. Mom, she said carefully, you've been quiet lately, more than usual. I kept working, gathering crimson and gold into neat piles. Just thinking. About us? I straightened slowly, meeting her eyes. About everything. She nodded, as if she'd expected that answer. Do you ever wonder if we deserved more punishment or less? The question hung between us like fallen leaves waiting to be swept away. I set the rake aside and sat on the garden bench Robert had built from old cedar planks. Sarah joined me. The air smelled of earth and approaching winter. I wonder a lot of things, I admitted. I wonder if keeping the trust so strict makes me controlling. I wonder if cutting you off from the bulk of the money was revenge dressed up as wisdom. And then I remember the sold sign, the changed locks, the way you both looked at me like I was already gone. Sarah's breath caught. We were wrong, completely wrong. But sometimes I think you still see us as those people, the ones who betrayed you. Her words stung because they carried truth. Not always, I said softly, but the memory stays. It's like a splinter under the skin. You don't feel it every day, but press the wrong spot and it flares. We sat in silence a while. The sun dipped lower, painting long shadows across the lawn. Finally, Sarah spoke again. What would make the splinter easier to live with? I thought about Robert's final letter, about scar tissue, about strength. Honesty, I said. Not just apologies, ongoing honesty. And time. Time showing me, not telling me that the change is real. She reached for my hand. This time I didn't pull away. Then that's what we'll keep giving you, every day. Michael's path looked different, but carried the same weight. He visited less often because of distance, but when he came, he stayed longer. One spring weekend, he arrived with his wife, Lisa, and their toddler son carrying a surprise, blueprints for a small addition to the house. I know you said no major changes, he began nervously, but hear me out. A sunroom off the back, lots of windows, place for the grandkids to play when it's raining, and a niche for you, with built-in bookshelves for Dad's old journals. I studied the drawings. Simple, thoughtful, practical. Why now? I asked. Because I want to build something instead of taking, he said. I want my son to grow up knowing his grandma's house is a place of safety, not something that can be sold out under her. Lisa touched his arm gently. He's been saving for this, every overtime shift. No loans, no shortcuts. I looked from the blueprints to my son's face. Older now, lined with lessons learned the hard way. All right, I said, but we do it together. No surprises. He grinned, the same boyish grin from childhood, and hugged me fiercely. For the first time since everything happened, the embrace felt clean, no guilt hanging between us, just family. Construction took the whole summer. Neighbors stopped by to watch progress. Helen brought lemonade and gossip. The granddaughters helped by carrying tiny buckets of nails and scattering sawdust like confetti. Sarah painted trim while Michael framed balls. I supervised from a lawn chair, offering opinions nobody asked for, and everyone pretended to value. By September, the sunroom stood finished. Bright, airy, filled with light even on cloudy days. We moved Robert's favorite armchair inside, along with the journals we'd read together years earlier. On opening day, we gathered there. Children, grandchildren, even Helen and Tom, with cake and sparkling cider. I raised my glass to new beginnings and to remembering the old ones without letting them define us. Everyone echoed the toast. Laughter followed. Stories, plans for next Christmas. Normal family sounds that once felt impossible. But life, as always, refused to stay tidy. 2 years later, a letter arrived. Official stationery, return address from a law firm I'd never heard of. Inside, notice of a class action lawsuit against the investment firm that had managed some of Robert's older stocks decades ago. Allegations of improper fee structures, potential settlement in the millions, and because the certificates were still in my name. More money. I stared at the papers for a long time. Then I called Sarah and Michael on a group video call. They listened as I explained. Sarah spoke first. What are you going to do? I exhaled slowly. I'm going to let the lawyers handle it. If there's a settlement, it goes straight into the trust. Same rules, no changes. Michael nodded. Good. That's fair. No arguments, no hints of expectation, just acceptance. That moment crystallized everything. They weren't waiting for another windfall. They weren't scheming. They were living their lives. Honest, modest, accountable. Later that year, on the anniversary of Robert's passing, we held our now traditional gathering at the house. Dinner, stories, the grandchildren performing silly plays they'd rehearsed. At the end, as always, we walked to the oak tree with flashlights, each placing a small stone at its base, a ritual we'd started years ago. Sarah added hers last. For growth, she said. Michael placed his next. For strength. I added mine. For love that endures. We stood in the circle of light, hands linked, watching our breath mist in the cool night air. I looked up at the branches, stronger every year, and felt something settle deep inside me. The betrayal had been real. The pain had been real. But so was the healing. So was the choice, day after day, to rebuild instead of destroy. In the quiet after everyone left, I sat in the sunroom with Robert's photo on the side table. Moonlight spilled across the floor. I kept my promise, I whispered to him. I protected what mattered, and I learned to let go of the rest. Somewhere in the stillness, I felt his answer. Not words, but peace. The house stood quiet around me, full of echoes both old and new, and for the first time in many years, every single one of them felt like home. Time has a way of softening edges while sharpening truths. 10 years had passed since that rainy afternoon when the sold sign first pierced my lawn like a dagger. The oak tree now towered over the backyard, its branches wide enough to shelter 3 generations during summer picnics. Grandchildren, 5 of them now, climbed its lower limbs, their shouts mixing with the hum of bees and the roses. The house itself had settled into a gentle aging, creaky floors that told stories with every step, windows that caught the morning light just right, walls patched and repainted, but still carrying the faint scent of Robert's pipe tobacco if you stood close enough. I was 87 now. Not old in the way people sometimes mean it, frail and fading, but seasoned. My steps were slower, my eyesight dimmer without glasses, but my mind stayed sharp, and my heart had learned to hold both joy and sorrow without letting either overwhelm the other. Sarah lived nearby still, in the same modest house she'd bought after selling her old one. She ran the senior advocacy program now, had become something of a local expert on protecting elders from financial abuse. Irony again, but the good kind. She spoke at community centers, churches, libraries, always ending her talks the same way. The hardest person to protect someone from is family, but family is also the best place to start healing. Michael and Lisa had moved back to our town 3 years earlier. Their children, 2 boys and a girl, attended the same elementary school Sarah and Michael once had. He worked as a project manager for a local builder, specializing in accessible homes for aging residents. Paying it forward, he called it. No more chasing big scores, just steady work, fair pay, and coming home every night to dinner with his kids. We had our routines, Sunday dinners at my place, birthday parties in the backyard, holidays with too much food and too many voices talking at once. Normal, precious, earned. But even in peace, questions arrive uninvited. One winter evening, after the grandchildren had gone home and the dishes were done, Sarah and Michael stayed behind. We sat in the sunroom, now my favorite place, with mugs of chamomile tea steaming between us. Outside, snow fell softly, blanketing the world in quiet. Sarah set her mug down. "Mom, we've been talking." I raised an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" Michael chuckled. "No, actually the opposite." Sarah took a breath. "The trust, the investments, everything you've built. We've been thinking about what happens next. Not soon, not for a long time, but someday." I waited. They had never brought this up before. Not once in 10 years had either of them asked about inheritance, access, changes. That alone told me this conversation mattered. "We're not asking for more," Michael said quickly. "We don't want or need it. But we've been wondering, what if we turned part of it into something bigger, something that outlasts all of us?" Sarah nodded. "A foundation, named after Dad, focused on financial literacy for families, especially multi-generational ones, teaching people how to talk about money without it destroying relationships, how to set boundaries with love, how to protect elders without taking away their dignity. I let their words settle. The idea felt right immediately, like a key sliding into a lock I'd forgotten existed. "And you?" I asked. "What would your role be?" "Administrators," Michael said. "Unpaid at first, maybe later modest salaries if it grows, but the board would have independent members too. No family majority, no chance for old patterns to repeat." Sarah leaned forward. "We want to make sure no one else goes through what we put you through, and we want to prove, to you, to ourselves, that we've really changed." I looked from one to the other. Their faces carried no greed, no calculation, only earnestness and a touch of fear, the fear of being misunderstood again. I stood slowly, walked to the bookshelf where Robert's journals still sat. I pulled one down, the last one he'd written, and opened it to a page I'd read many times but never shared. "Listen to this," I said. I read aloud in the soft lamplight. "October 12th, 2008. Market crashed again today. Maggie worried about the kids' futures. I told her our real wealth isn't in stocks, it's in the lessons we teach them. If they learn to value people over things, to give without keeping score, to ask for help when they need it and give it when they can, then we've done our job. The money will take care of itself. Or it won't. Either way, they'll be okay." I closed the journal gently. "Your father always believed in legacy over fortune," I said. "I think he'd be proud." Tears shimmered in Sarah's eyes. Michael's throat worked. "So yes," I continued, "we'll create the foundation, we'll name it after him, and you'll help run it, but with rules, transparency, accountability, the same things I had to learn the hard way." They both exhaled at once, relief washing over them. That night, after they left, I sat alone in the sunroom again. Snow continued falling, muting the world outside. I thought about the journey, from betrayal to courtrooms to cautious forgiveness to this moment of shared purpose. I hadn't erased the past. The scar remained. But scar tissue, as Dr. Ellis once said, can be strong. It can protect. It can even become part of something beautiful. Months later, we filed the paperwork. The Robert J. Thompson Family Legacy Foundation came into being quietly. No press releases, no fanfare, just a mission statement, a small board, and seed funding from the trust. The first programs launched the next year: free workshops at community centers, online courses for families, scholarships for financial planning certifications aimed at helping seniors and their adult children navigate tough conversations. Sarah and Michael threw themselves into it. I watched from the sidelines, advising when asked, staying silent when not needed. Seeing them work side by side without tension, seeing them listen to strangers' stories of betrayal and greed and hope, it healed something in me I hadn't realized was still broken. One crisp spring day, years after the foundation began, I stood at the base of the oak tree with my great-grandson, barely 2, chubby hands full of dandelion wishes. He blew, and white seeds danced into the air. Sarah appeared beside me, watching the same scene. "Look at that," she whispered. "All those wishes going out into the world." I smiled. "Your dad used to say every seed carried a promise." She slipped her arm through mine. "We kept ours." "Yes," I said. "We did." The house stood behind us, solid, lived in, loved. Inside were generations of memories, pain that had taught us, love that had rebuilt us, truth that had set us free. I looked up through the branches at the sky, so wide, so clear. And in that moment, I knew. Revenge isn't the opposite of betrayal. Healing is. And sometimes healing looks like an oak tree growing tall, roots deep, branches reaching for tomorrow. Years continued to turn like pages in one of Robert's old journals, steady, quiet, filled with small entries that together told a larger story. I reached my 92nd birthday surrounded by more noise and love than I ever thought possible after that terrible rainy day. The house had become a gathering place again, not just for family, but for friends, neighbors, even strangers who came through the Foundation's programs and stayed for coffee and stories. The Robert J. Thompson Family Legacy Foundation had grown far beyond what any of us imagined. What started with a few community workshops now reached thousands online and in person across the state. Young couples learned how to discuss finances before marriage. Adult children attended sessions on caring for aging parents without crossing boundaries. Seniors came to understand their rights and how to spot early signs of exploitation. Every success story felt like a small victory against the version of myself that once stood helpless in front of a changed lock. Sarah led the organization with a quiet authority she hadn't possessed before the betrayal. She spoke from experience, never hiding what happened, never glorifying it either. "We almost destroyed our family for money we didn't need," she'd tell audiences. "The shame still visits me sometimes, but shame can be a teacher if you let it." Michael served on the board and handled operations, logistics, funding applications, partnerships. He was the steady one now, the man who showed up early and stayed late. His children grew up hearing the story, not as a secret family scandal, but as a cautionary tale told with love. "Grandma taught us," his oldest son once said at a school presentation, "that family isn't about who owns what. It's about who shows up when it matters." I watched it all from my sunroom chair, a knitted blanket across my lap, the oak tree visible through the windows like a living monument. My days were slower now, reading, napping, listening to the grandchildren play, but my mind remained busy, turning over the long arc of everything that had happened. One afternoon, as autumn light slanted golden across the floor, Sarah brought me a thick folder. "What's this?" I asked, adjusting my glasses. "Letters," she said, "from people who've gone through our programs. I thought maybe you'd like to read them." I opened the folder carefully. Handwritten notes, printed emails, some short, some pages long, all thanking the foundation, all sharing pieces of their own pain and healing. One woman wrote, "My son tried to get power of attorney without telling me. Your workshop gave me the courage to say no and get a lawyer. We're talking again now, not perfectly, but honestly." A man in his 60s, "After my daughter sold my cabin behind my back, I felt worthless. Your mother's story, your real mother's story, made me realize I wasn't alone, and that forgiveness doesn't mean going back to how things were. It means moving forward differently." I read until my eyes grew tired, then closed the folder and rested it on my lap like something precious. Sarah sat beside me. "We did this because of you." "No," I corrected gently. "We did this because of what happened to us, and because we chose not to let it end there." She rested her head on my shoulder, a gesture she hadn't done since she was small. "Do you regret anything?" I thought about it, really thought. I regret the years we lost to silence and resentment. I regret not seeing the signs earlier, not teaching boundaries sooner. But regret the fight itself? No, that fight saved us. It forced us to look at who we were becoming and decide to be better. Michael arrived later that day with his family. We ate dinner together. Nothing fancy, just roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans from the garden Helen still tended for me. The grandchildren chattered about school and soccer and the latest video game. Normal sounds, healing sounds. After dessert, Michael cleared his throat. "Mom, we have something for you." He handed me a small, wrapped box. Inside, a silver locket. When I opened it, 2 tiny photos, one of Robert and me on our wedding day, the other a recent one of all of us, Sarah, Michael, their spouses, the grandchildren, standing under the oak tree. For the next generation to remember that we almost lost it, and that we didn't. Tears came then, not from pain, but from fullness. I fastened the locket around my neck, feeling its gentle weight. That night, after everyone left and the house grew still, I walked slowly to the basement stairs. My knees protested, but I went anyway, one careful step at a time. The false panel was still there, though empty now, the documents long since moved to a safe deposit box, the cash donated years ago to the Foundation's emergency fund for seniors in crisis. I touched the wood where Robert had once carved his clever latch. "You were right," I whispered. "It was our insurance policy, not just for money, for truth." Upstairs again, I settled into the sunroom with the lights off, only moonlight spilling across the floor. The locket rested cool against my skin. I thought about the woman I'd been that first day, shocked, betrayed, trembling in the rain. I thought about the woman I became, fierce, wounded, determined, and the woman I was now, older, slower, but whole in a way I hadn't known was possible. Betrayal had cracked us open, revenge had tempted me, but neither had the final word. Healing did. Love did. Stubborn, tested, rebuilt love. Outside, the oak leaves rustled in the night wind. Somewhere, a grandchild's forgotten toy lay in the grass. Tomorrow, there would be more laughter, more small arguments, more making up, more life. I closed my eyes and smiled into the darkness. "Thank you, Robert," I murmured, "for seeing what I couldn't, for hiding what needed to be hidden until the right moment." And in the quiet that followed, I felt the deepest peace of my life, not because everything was perfect, but because everything had been faced, and we had chosen, day after day, year after year, to choose each other anyway. That is the real fortune. That is the legacy. And that, my dears, is the only justice worth having.